Hello, you lovely people. So in the last video, I was talking about combining IK, rigging with mocap stuff, and I've been doing a bunch more with that. This is how that one shot I was showing you turned out. Just kind of fun. It went nuts on all these little gauges. They're all wiggling with noise modifiers and all of that. Also, have a little photo scan of a hand going and wiggle modifiers on everything. So that's been really cool. But along this process, I've just been learning more stuff. This video is basically just going to be, an introduction to mechanical rigging and mostly IK based. And so if you already know all of that, I'm going to be doing kind of beginner type stuff. So I made this shot, and then I made another shot, kind of to show off this new thing. And did you see it? Here, we'll watch it one more time. There, that time, surely you saw it. It's right here. No, you can't see it at all. I made a whole shot to show it off, and it's not even visible. It's this linkage right here, and all of these greebles are the ones I just put out for you guys. Just kind of parented to some bones visible here, and all of this is controlled from this one bone, which is really cool. And this is being controlled in the way I was talking about in the video like last week, where it's all just controlling the IK of the foot and kind of going up through there. And I think the same for like this guy. It's like woo woo woo, and so I can animate all of this, and like the ship first and the pilot's just kind of doing what needs to be done to keep everything going, and then I can add a final pass on top of it, if I want to, which is a really fun way to do it. And because all of these constraints are just like trying to solve this, are just solving stuff, you can scale things and see how it all works out. Like, how would any of this work if it were different ratios or different sizes? And that is just really cool. Again, this is all just very basic stuff, but I wanted to show you, in case you don't know, how to do something like this, because I'm thinking, like, I don't know, in the Matrix they have those big robots and they were covered in all those, pistons and all of that stuff. Like, you could do that, or if you had some mocap or built any sort of robot and you wanted to cover it in just like little pieces that are actually doing things, it's just really straightforward. Or also, okay, so you use Blender to figure out all of this stuff, right? And then you could actually, like, I don't know, maybe mark where these holes are using booleans into the objects. Where to go? Yes, okay. Boolean. Let me select the right object. There we go. Yeah. So you mark all that out using booleans, and then you could either like laser cut it, or just project it, or print it out and trace it and cut it out, and actually like assemble this stuff in real life if you were trying to make like a moving sculpture, or rig up anything really, which is a very cool way to be able to design something and kind of bring it in the real world, or like using it for trying to make like a robot hand and then 3D printing it, and you can actually see the way all the joints will work ahead of time, which is very exciting. I'm very excited to do that. Sean has a laser cutter, and so we might be making some weird stuff. So I know I kind of talked about it in the last video, but I am going to get very basic for a second, and so maybe skip ahead if you already know some of this stuff. And is this my face? Yes! If you want my face, here's my face. And I don't know if that helps the learning process at all. So with objects, you have object mode, and then if you go up here, you can go into edit mode, or just hit tab to go in between the two. And yelling out hotkeys is my cue to turn on screencast keys here. And so in edit mode, you can edit stuff, and rigging is exactly the same way, but with an additional mode, which is pose mode. And you can think of it kind of like like Geppetto, like making Pinocchio. When he's making the puppet and tweaking all this stuff, that's edit mode. And pose mode is when Geppetto, or when Pinocchio like goes out on stage and he's dancing, and like Geppetto's like crying. And then object mode is when he's like put back in the box in the closet. Or it's just it's not a thing. Okay, so to make an armature, I'm just gonna hit you can go add always, boop, but I'm gonna hit Shift A, armature, single bone, and right now it's in object mode, so I'm gonna hit tab to go into edit mode. And you can either grab the tips here, or you can grab the middle and do the whole bone. And this is kind of the root of the bone, and so that's typically the rotation point. And so if we were to make like some hips, I might drag this down here, or like a leg, and this is the hip. Drag that down there. Just like in mesh mode, E is extrude. Great. And hit it again to make a little foot. Now if we go into pose mode, we can grab this bone and see it bends everything down below. If we do this, it's like that. I told you, very beginner stuff for a second here. But say we wanted to have this footstep, you know, like this leg walking. But the foot like to stay locked on the ground. So if we have it like move this way, then we'd have to go kind of like this and kind of like, and that isn't enough. So we do that. And this is how I used to animate. Like I do robot spiders and stuff and just try to keep the legs centered. And you can't do it perfectly. Fortunately, there is a vastly easier solution. And that is, instead of having a foot bone connected, have a completely separate foot bone. A bone that does not care at all about this leg. It's just doing its own thing. And then in pose mode here, when the bones moved when we went into pose mode because they have a translation on them. Remember, we're animating them. But if you select them and hit Alt-G and Alt-R, it'll reset them to their usual position. Okay, yeah. So here's our foot. If we shift-click on that bone and hit Shift-I, it lets us automatically make an IK constraint. And look at that. Now if we grab this bone, you know, we can stick it wherever we want and move the hips. Boop, 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 boop. And that's very easy. And it's just so convenient. If you shift right click, you're putting the 3D cursor somewhere, and when you're making stuff, it'll always appear there. So that's kind of a nice thing to do. And let's say you're making like a mech with one of those like crazy legs or something like that, and then for example, instead of just making, I'm gonna hit Shift S, cursor to selected, so when I make a new bone, it appears at the end of this other bone. This actually isn't connected, it's just appearing there. Yeah, go into pose mode here. This one, Shift I, and now, woo! Look at that, you've got your weird, like, ostrich leg. This bone is yellow because it has the constraint on it, and you can see this is how far the IK effect is going. It's going all the way up. But if we click on the constraint tab here, you can control how long that goes. And so now it's just doing that one bone. If you do two, you can see the dotted line goes to there. So then you could do this, and maybe this is like a more robotic hip that you don't want to be, you know, solving with the IK. But you can start to stack this stuff, which is very nifty. For example, with a lot of levers, they're not actually they're not rotating from their pivot. There's just a fulcrum, and you're actually doing something underneath. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like rotating a lever, it's usually extending, and you can do that so easily just by like let's see, I'm gonna add another bone down here, and just like you'd regularly do, Control P, keep offset, and now if we go into pose mode, boop, see that bone's doing its thing. And let's say we turn this into an IK situation also, and so this is going over here and like extends up there. I'm gonna make it my new IK bone, and in pose mode, do Shift I to active bone. And now when we rotate this, it's doing all of that stuff. And so let's say we want this to control, like, you know, this is inside the fuselage and we want it to be controlling like an aileron or something like that. We could have our, we'll add our new little aileron bone up here. I don't know if it's an aileron, ailerons, elevators, whatever, you know. Control P, keep offset, and now when the pilot controls this, that thing's doing its little deal over there. And if you want it to be like, if you wanted it to be moving even more, you could like shrink this bone, woo, and like just change all of the ratios. Or what if we move it like that? No, I don't know. But you get to start playing around with all of this, which is like really fun. So now you can see I moved this stick just a little bit, and that one goes like crazy, which is very fun. But let's see. I'm gonna apply all this as the rest pose. Kind of messy. But you can also like use this to control other ones and just start nesting everything. So here, I'll shrink this one just a little bit. Let's create a new bone here. Parent it to this bone. Yeah. And then extrude it out to like here, and we'll add our new, you know, this will be our control bone for that IK. Go into pose mode, that to that, Control P, no, Shift I to active bone, and now when we do this, look at that, it's doing its thing. One thing to keep in mind is when you add an IK thing like this, it will go all the way to the root, which will mess you up. So I think that's why this has been going kind of weird. Yeah, there we go. Now it's still being weird. I think that's because this is doing it too. Yeah, this is going all the way to the end. And so you really only want it to control the part that, will affect things. So right now the ratio is so crazy that I can only move it a little bit. If we shrink this, I think, a little bit, or blow this one up. Ha! Okay, you can... There we go. Now it makes a little bit more sense. But you can imagine how easily it would be to just rig robots like that with hinges and everything that do all of that. And, because then all you have to do is parent, like... we're in object mode now. I'm going to make a little cube. And a lot of times when you're working with the rig, your objects will obscure the rig. So I'm going to click on that, go into Object Data Properties, and under Viewport Display, have a display in front. And now you can just always see it. So let's see here. There's this. That's like little hinge object. Ooh, and imagine if this were actually good. Yes. And we'll just make a little thing right here. Yeah. Boop. And we'll do another one for right here. And let's see, extrude that. Yeah. Maybe that will extend. Beefy robot. I don't even know what this would be. I'm gonna select everything and hit P by loose parts, and now every object is now its own little object, and we can very easily just go through and to parent to a bone, you don't parent to the entire armature object. You have to have the object selected and then shift click on the armature, go into pose mode, and with the bone selected, hit Control P, parent to bone. It's not that weird. Back into object mode. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, and now if we control our bone, we've got this whole crazy thing happening, and maybe this is not as whoa, you can break it. Maybe this isn't as cool to you as it is to me, but I think it's just the coolest thing, because for some reason I've put it off learning it for like 15 years. And then it took like 15 minutes just to be like, oh, how does this actually work? You can spend far longer than 15 minutes learning constraints, but the IK stuff was fairly straightforward. But yeah, so that's where you realize the bone constraints tab. You can set up this IK constraint instead of hitting Shift I like we're doing. You can just create one and put in all of like the stuff by hand. It just is a little bit easier. But you can do, this gives you ways to make like we'll get into it, but transformation, like when you move an object on one axis, you can also have that control the rotation of like a different bone or something like that. In fact, let's jump over to that right now. I think we've kind of milked this pretty good. Let's go over to this train. Woo! You can see we've got the control bone here, and different things are constrained to different axes. I'm gonna try just let's see. Yeah. Apply as rest pose. Select all of these. Clear parent. If I delete this now, hopefully it'll just stay like that. Yes, excellent. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, trains are rad. And when I was a kid, until like a couple days ago, when I finally decided to like look it up on Wikipedia, I would just draw trains with all the random bars and everything kind of going across, and I was like, yeah, it's just a big mess. But man, those engineers, they are doing some clever stuff. It turns out when all you have is steam power to power your entire civilization, you figure out some good ways of working with the steam. And so I was trying to do a Walshart linkage, which is a very cool way to control the steam power by offsetting when the stuff happens. Basically, there's a piston in here, boop, and there's another little controller sliding piece up in this bit here, and it alternates between forcing the steam into here and pushing the steam over that way, and then basically sliding the other way when the piston goes like that, and the steam comes and pushes in this way and vents out there. But it's offset by 90 degrees, and so there's this, it's just ways to maximize pressure, and you can look it up. There's a bunch of old hobbyist men doing really cool stuff with like model trains. But that's not why we're here. We're here to try to figure out how to rig up some bones. So I'm just going to put cursor to selected. We're going to just add some bones first. Shift A, armature, single bone, and I'm going to have it rotate out like that. Yes. I'm going to put, let's see, another bone right here. This is basically a null. Like, this bone only exists so that other stuff can be attached to it. In fact, all bones are nulls. If you hit render, the bones don't render. It's just so you can, you know, create your skeleton. Okay. So with a piston, you have a weird situation, because with all of the stuff we've been talking about with like the hips stay still and everything else moves. And that's the whole point, is you move the foot and the hip doesn't move. But with a piston, it's supposed to be sliding around. There isn't a stationary part on the thing, you're just trying to constrain it. And so what we're going to actually add is kind of a buffer bone. So here's this, rotate it 90 degrees, make it so it's visible in front, yes. So here's our buffer bone. Here's our actual piston. Let's slide this up so it's more in line here. Boop. And then I'm going to extrude this out to this bone here. And now if we go into pose mode, we can do what we've been talking about. Here's our control bone. Shift click on that. Shift I. Create our IK. But when we move this, it does the whole chain. But fortunately, it's really easy to tweak that. So we're going to click on this bone, and under the bone properties, we have this inverse kinematics tab. And so we're just going to lock all of these. And also we're going to do that for this, because we don't want it rotating at all. We don't want it rotating to solve the IK. And now you can see now it's just this one bone, but it isn't actually connecting unless if we're right there. And so we can give this bone some give, turn up the stretch, and now look at that. So if we like edit, or if we parent this to this center bone, boop, chugga 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 chugga. Yeah, and so now we can parent, you know, that to that bone, that to that bone, this piston to that bone, and when we rotate that, that's cool. Okay, let's do the other wheel. So in theory you could animate the other wheel with IK, because like if you're starting here and it's going to here and then the hub, that's just a solvable IK. And then as it goes there, it's doing, this is our hip and this is our foot, and as it goes around, it's doing that. But IK doesn't always want to do stuff, you know, with it's not expecting to intersect itself. That's not really what it's built for. So we're going to do it kind of in a cheating way, and there's probably better ways to do it, but we're not going to do it that way. So I'm just going to duplicate this bone for fun. And I guess we should be naming them. This will be hub 2, and this will be hub 1. And under the constraints here, in pose mode is where you add constraints. Under the constraints, I'm just going to copy rotation, and I'm going to copy the rotation of hub 1, and now whatever we do to this one, this other one is going to do also. And so if I create a, let's see, go back into edit mode. There's a lot of modes to kind of keep straight. I'm going to add a bone here. Cool. Kind of stick it, yeah, stick it there. And I'm going to create, parent that one and that one. Basically trying to recreate this right here. And I'm going to create another bone. And I guess I'll parent it to this one here and line up the root right there. Cool. Bring this over here, and I'm going to use, to keep it connected, I'm going to use a stretch 2 constraint. So that does exactly what it sounds like. Let's name this bone real quick. You can also, like, you can just look, and it's called bone? What? That's just called bone? Oh, because I renamed the original the original bone that cleared up space, so now that is just bone. Okay, that does make sense. So back in pose mode, this is just gonna go to bone, and now wherever this goes, that does. And so if we parent that, and then we parent this bone to that bone. I think I said bone a couple too many times. Excellent. So let's duplicate this, but line it up like that. I just add a bone? I did. Okay, so this will be this stretchy bone. This will be the piston. This will be the connecting rod going down there. And at the end here, we're going to add the control bone, which will be parented to the main wheel. Okay, and now if we go into pose mode, I'm assuming you kind of know what this is all about at this point. This is the control one. This is the one we want the IK. Shift I to active bone. Great. And so now if we do this, it's doing a solution, but got to constrain these axes here. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, boop, boop. And turn up the stretch. And now, chugga, 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 chugga. We've got our offset bit. We just have to parent to the bones. Did I do this right? Wait a second. Did I do this right? Yes, I did. I did. Ha! That piston, that bone. Now we rotate this one. Excellent. What is this thing doing? What is that? I guess we can use it to like... Oh yeah, there. Okay, there we go. It's a weird mount. You can't just mount two things sticking out of a wheel because they'd intersect, and so they actually have this mounted on the outside of this one. This isn't a great demonstration of it, but this is kind of how they link it up, because if you just mount it to the wheel, then, you know, when it rotates, those would just be... Must have grabbed the wrong bone. Yeah, there we go. They would be intersecting, and so that's kind of clever. So many little clever bits. Too many bits for my brain to keep track of all at once. But okay, so the last thing, could we link this all up so that it moves when you move it? So the wheels turn. Use your words, Ian. I'm decent at talking when I know really good what I'm doing, but the moment that I actually have to think about it, I actually tried. I have both Caitlin and Sean. I was like, could you just come sit here and I'll just try to like actually teach you, so I have an actual person to hold in my head instead of like every possible person who might ever be watching this video. But yeah, okay. So let's create a control bone and make it so that when we move it, all the wheels just automatically turn. So going into edit mode here. Creating our control bone. Excellent. And we're just going to parent everything that isn't already parented to that, which I think are these two pistons and these two wheels here. So parent all of that, and we will get a weird thing when we go into pose mode. Oh no! Why is this? We know why this is. It's that old IK constraint going all the way back to the root. We only want it to go to the end of the chain. 2, 3. Yes, there we go. Okay, so now everything is all working. We'll parent this to that root bone. Okay, so I just recorded this 3 times and made the exact same mistake like 3 times. And so let's do it again and make the same mistakes all over again. So with constraints, what's really cool is a lot of times you're just like, well, I want to do this, and you open up the menu and you go, oh, hot darn, look at that. That's the option right there. And so in this case, I was like, I want to transform motion along the x-axis into rotation on the y-axis. And you go into the constraints and you go, transformation. So the target is going to be the armature. The bone is going to be, I named it the master control bone, blah, 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 doom. And we want to translate location of this bone on its x-axis into rotation on the y-axis. And So we have to say, let's see, y-axis is coming from the x-axis on here. X to y. Great. And so that means we just have to map a range first. So let's just map it to like 0 to 5. Because that's kind of what it does. It's saying, hey, all right, so from here to here, you know, it'll go like this or something like that. But we can extrapolate it, which means if this keeps going, this will just keep doing it 360 forever. So we're just kind of trying to dial in the ratio right here. And then on the y-axis, we're going to do negative 360 to 360. And is that already working? Look at that! Look at that! Oh, that's great. So now we just dial in this. So let's try like negative 8. Now it's going forwards. It's still going maybe a little fast, so maybe like negative 11. And that's really cool. Like, okay, so here's some landing gear, and when it rotates down, you know, this bone extends, and when it gets close to the ground, it kind of contracts a little bit, and it also follows the ground, and it's all just so easy. So this bone has a copy location on it, so it's copying location of this bone, but also a shrink wrap, which is shrink wrapping onto the ground down here, and so it's like ooh, and let's see, this bone has a bunch of stuff. It has a floor, so it won't go, you know, below a once it gets close enough to this bone. And limited location, yes, transformation, and that's linked, you know, from the rotation of this bone and the location on that one, which is kind of cool. So all that to say, last night I started trying to make this shot to better show off the linkages, because that's a good way to make your film, by orienting your shots around showing off your rigging. No, and also it's still not visible, but yeah, it's always fun. I'm not a good animator, but I do know how to iterate and just wiggle stuff over and over and over until stuff gets better. And so this is kind of version 1.0. And by the time you see the final, hopefully it'll be a little bit better. But yeah, anyways, yeah, that's a video. Hopefully that's useful.